famous people who passed away in 1781. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. George Taylor. He was born in 1716 and he died in February 1781. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an American iron master and politician who was the founding father of the United States and a signer of the United States Declaration of Independence as a representative of Pennsylvania. His former home, the George Taylor House in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, was named a National Historic Landmark in 1971. Cornelius Harnet. He was born in April 1723 and he died in April 1781. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an American founding father, politician, merchant, plantation owner, and slaveholder from Wilmington, North Carolina. He was a leading American revolutionary statesman in Cape Fear region and a delegate for North Carolina in the Continental Congress from 1777 to 1779, where he signed the Articles of Confederation. Richard Challoner. He was born in September 1691 and he died in January 1781. His age was 89 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was paralysis. He was an English Catholic prelate who served as Vicar Apostolic of the London district during the greater part of the 18th century, and as titular Bishop of Dobras. In 1738, he published a revision of the Douay-Rheims Bible. Mariana Victoria of Spain. She was born in March 1718 and she died in January 1781. Her age was 62 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was heart disease. She was an infanta of Spain by birth and was later the Queen of Portugal as wife of King Joseph I. She acted as regent of Portugal in 1776 and 1777 during the last months of her husband's life, and as advisor to her daughter Maria I of Portugal in her reign. Gotthold Ephraim Lessing. He was born in January 1729 and he died in February 1781. His age was 52 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was stroke. He was a German philosopher, dramatist, publicist, and art critic, and a representative of the Enlightenment era. His plays and theoretical writings substantially influenced the development of German literature. He is widely considered by theater historians to be the first dramaturg in his role at Abel Seyler's Hamburg National Theater. Johannes Ewald. He was born in November 1743 and he died in March 1781. His age was 37 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Danish national dramatist, psalm writer, and poet. The lyrics of a song from one of his plays are used for one of the Danish national anthems. Quite until the days of Romanticism, Ewald was considered the unsurpassed Danish poet. And Robert Turgot. He was born in May 1727 and he died in March 1781. His age was 53 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French economist and statesman, sometimes considered a physiocrat. He is today best remembered as an early advocate of economic liberalism. He is thought to have been the first political economist to have postulated something like the law of diminishing marginal returns in agriculture. James Abercrombie. He was born in 1706 and he died in April 1781. His age was 75 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British Army general and Whig politician who sat in the House of Commons from 1734 to 1754. He was commander-in-chief of forces in North America during the French and Indian War, best known for the disastrous British losses in the 1758 Battle of Carillon. Francisco Garces. He was born in April 1738 and he died in July 1781. His age was 43 at the time of his death, and he was killed in an uprising by Native Americans. He was a Spanish Franciscan friar who served as a missionary and explorer in the colonial viceroyalty of New Spain. He explored much of the southwestern region of North America, including present-day Sonora and Baja, California in Mexico, and the United States of Arizona and California. John Joachim Zobli. He was born in August 1724 and he died in July 1781. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Swiss-born American pastor, planter, and statesman during the American Revolution. Although a delegate from Georgia to the Continental Congress in 1775, he resisted independence from Great Britain and became a loyalist. Charles Rowe. He was born in May 1715 and he died in May 1781. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English industrialist. He played an important role in establishing the silk industry in Cheshire and later became involved in the mining and metal industries. Giacomo Puccini, Senior. He was born in January 1712 and he died in May 1781. His age was 69 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an 18th century Italian composer who lived and worked primarily in Lucca, Tuscany. He was the first of 5 generations of composers, the most famous of whom was his great-great-grandson, the opera composer Giacomo Puccini. Tupac Amaru II. He was born in 1742 and he died in May 1781. His age was 43 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was execution. He was an indigenous leader who led a large Andean rebellion against the Spanish in Peru, as self-proclaimed Sapainga of New Inca Empire. He later became a mythical figure in the Peruvian struggle for independence and indigenous rights movement, as well as an inspiration to myriad causes in Spanish America and beyond. John Conder. He was born in June 1714 and he died in May 1781. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an independent minister at Cambridge, who later became president of the Independent College, Homerton, in the parish of Hackney, near London. He was a theological tutor at Placerus Hall Academy and residential tutor and theological tutor at Mile End Academy, then the theological tutor at Homerton Academy. Michaela Bastidas Fujikawa. She was born in June 1744 and she died in May 1781. Her age was 36 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was execution. She was a pioneering indigenous leader against Spanish rule in South America and a martyr for Peruvian independence with her husband, Tupac Amaru. She led a rebellion against the Spanish and, like him, suffered martyrdom of execution by the Spaniards when the revolt failed. Giovanni Battista Beccaria. He was born in October 1716 and he died in May 1781. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian physicist, a fellow of the Royal Society. He published several papers on electrical subjects in the field trans. He was one of Benjamin Franklin's more conspicuous correspondents. Charles-François de Borja, Marquis de Rouffec. He was born in January 1719 and he died in August 1781. His age was 61 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French soldier and diplomat from the House of Bourbon. He served in the French army and was one of the foremost diplomats in the service of Louis XV. He is chiefly remembered in connection with the Secret Duel. Lord Richard Cavendish. He was born in June 1752 and he died in September 1781. His age was 29 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English nobleman and politician, a member of a prominent Cavendish family. In 1773, he entered the House of Commons as Member of Parliament from Lancaster after winning by election following the death of incumbent Francis Reynolds. In 1778 and 1779, he served with the Navy as a gentleman volunteer. Johann August Ernesti. He was born in August 1707 and he died in September 1781. His age was 74 at the time of his death, and he died after a short illness. He was a German rationalist, theologian, and philologist. Ernesti was the first who formally separated the hermeneutics of the Old Testament from those of New. He was an important figure in the Enlightenment's approach to classical texts. William Nassau de Zylestein, 4th Earl of Rochford. He was born in September 1717 and he died in September 1781. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British courtier, diplomat, and statesman of Anglo-Dutch descent. He occupied senior ambassadorial posts at Madrid and Paris and served as Secretary of State in both of the northern and southern departments. He is credited with the earliest known introduction of the Lombardy poplar to England, Peter Shoemakers. He was born in 1691 and he died in September 1781. His age was 90 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Flemish sculptor who worked for most of his life in London. His public and church sculptures in classicist style had an important influence on the development of modern sculpture in England. Edward Hawke, 1st Baron Hawke. He was born in February 1705 and he died in October 1781. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English Royal Navy officer. As captain of the 3rd Rate HMS Berwick, he took part in the Battle of Toulon in February 1744 during the War of the Austrian Succession. He also captured 6 ships of a French squadron at the Bay of Biscay in the Second Battle of Cape Finisterre. Johann Nikolaus Gotz. He was born in July 1721 and he died in November 1781. His age was 60 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a significant figure in German literary circles of the Enlightenment. He studied theology at Halle, where he became intimate with the poets Johann W.L. Gleim and Johann Peter Oz, acted for some years as military chaplain, and afterwards filled various other ecclesiastical offices. He died in the Winterberg. Charles Morris. He was born in June 1711 and he died in November 1781. His age was 70 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He served on the Nova Scotia Council Chief Justice of the Nova Scotia Supreme Court, and the Surveyor General for over 32 years. He created some of the first British maps of Canada's maritime region and designed the layout of Halifax, Lunenburg, Lawrencetown, and Liverpool. Jean-Frédéric Philippon, Comte of Maurepas. He was born in July 1701 and he died in November 1781. His age was 80 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French statesman and Count of Maurepas. He played a pivotal role in shaping French domestic and foreign policies, skilled in military and naval strategy. He enabled the French Navy to regain previously lost prestige, and France was once again recognized as a maritime power. Zenon de Somodevilla. He was born in April 1702 and he died in December 1781. His age was 79 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Spanish statesman and played a key role in crafting and enforcing the Great Gypsy Roundup, officially known as the General Imprisonment of the Gypsies, which was an attempt to exterminate the Roma living in Spain, leading to the death of 12,000 Romani people. John Needham. He was born in September 1713 and he died in December 1781. His age was 68 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English biologist and Roman Catholic priest. He was first exposed to natural philosophy while in seminary school and later published a paper which, while the subject was mostly about geology, described the mechanics of pollen and won recognition in the botany community. Juan Montoni Mayen. He was born in 1730 and he died in December 1781. His age was 51 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Spanish composer and Maestro de Capilla of Segovia Cathedral. He was succeeded by Pedro Arenas Ubides. Samuel Conrad Schwach. He was born in 1731 and he died in 1781. His age was 50 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Norwegian newspaper publisher. He founded the first Norwegian newspaper, which published its first issue on 25th May 1763. He is the grandfather of Norwegian jurist and author Konrad Nikolai Schwach. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.